we're loosening the rules for killing. This won't end well. Wherever the standard of freedom and independence has been or shall be unfurled, there'll her heart, her benedictions and her prayers be. But she goes not abroad, in search of monsters to destroy. John Quincy Adams, 1821. The U.S. military is going abroad in search of monsters to destroy, and Americans should be worried. New changes to U.S. counterterrorism policy, branded as getting decisions out of the White House and into the hands of commanders in the field, are going to make it easier to kill more people, in more places, with fewer explanations. Loosening the rules for killing may seem like a favor to those charged with fighting the Islamic State, ISIS, and al-Qaeda. But in many ways, the latest and least bounded mutation of America's war on terror may end up complicating, rather than simplifying, the job of our nation's spies, soldiers and diplomats, now and for decades to come. More, Niger surprise is a disservice to fallen soldiers, military families. More, Trump let down Sergeant Law David Johnson's widow and the nation. The U.S. military and CIA already employ lethal force against armed groups in up to 7 countries across the Middle East and Africa, oftentimes in secret. And, after receiving a briefing from Defense Secretary James Mattis, Senator Lindsey Graham told reporters to expect more aggression by the United States toward our enemies, not less. Niger may be next, NBC reports. With each new country and adversary added to the list, the relationship between the 2001 authorization for the use of military force in current U.S. operations becomes less and less recognizable. Even in places where the U.S. does not conduct strikes or raids on its own, these train and advise missions involving hundreds of Special Forces members in places like Niger, Somalia, and the Philippines may quickly escalate, thrusting U.S. forces into combat with little warning and deadly consequences. Any policy that increases the likelihood of expanding American military operations in the absence of debate and proper authorization from America's highest legislative body, risks undermining American democracy by obscuring the truth of U.S. involvement in war and its deadly costs. The proposed changes also risk further legitimating acts prescribed by international law, and thus weakening international norms in which the U.S. government has invested much to preserve an order which overwhelmingly serves its interests. Lowering the bar for taking the life of a person outside of, and sometimes within, a situation of armed conflict without due process should not be taken lightly. This trend could at some point cost America's relationship with allies who support American counterterrorism operations on the basis of at least some pretense to lawfulness. We are already seeing this play out in allied countries, such as the United Kingdom, Australia, and Germany, where the public is increasingly calling on their government to clarify the legal basis for drone strikes. By setting rules that effectively permit killing anyone, anytime, anywhere, the United States is building a dangerous precedent for other states, many of whom are already arming drones for use as they see fit. This will certainly compromise America's ability in the future to protest the practices of others when they begin to use lethal force against their adversaries, as they define them, and on their terms. This risk may seem acceptable when the world's adversary is ISIS. But when the adversary is a humanitarian worker, an activist, a political opponent or even an American, it may be too late. More, other views on Niger, a really bad idea right now. Policing the USA, a look at race, justice, media. Perhaps most puzzling, for the many risks and costs involved, it's hard to identify how setting fewer reasonable limits on killing really advances American interests or makes Americans safer. The administration has yet to articulate how any of its proposals serve some clear political end, other than annihilating terrorists, a goal that is as unachievable as it is dangerous to pursue. Not all groups or individuals that profess affinity for ISIS or al-Qaeda necessarily pose a threat to the United States, even fewer present a threat that can actually be solved by launching a missile. No good strategy leaves its ends undefined, and no good strategy ignores limitations or avoids hard choices. Setting out to kill every terrorist is not a strategy. It is the reckless folly of a superpower driven mad by its own insecurities. Soldiers and spies conduct their work within the parameters set by the commander-in-chief. Blurring already blurry lines will do them no favors. Quicker decisions will not always lead to better decisions. The greatest service the President and Mattis can perform for the brave men and women who fighting their wars is to restore the high standards and clarity that they, and the American public, deserve. Daniel R. Mahinti, director of the Center for Civilians in Conflicts U.S. program, spent 16 years at the State Department. The views expressed here are his own.